What's going on, people? Myke C-Town here to give my spoiler-filled Star Wars The Force Awakens review. If you haven't watched my spoiler-free review, make sure you do that. If you haven't seen the movie, turn this video off now because we're going to have some major spoilers going on all up in this piece. Jumping right in, so as I said in my spoiler-free review, I absolutely love this movie. I thought it was extremely well made, well executed, it was fun, it was action-packed, it was dramatic, it was funny, it was depressing, it was everything we got from the original trilogy. I think that the moment it starts, we're taken back to the original world of Star Wars, the one we got back in 1977. The set is dark, it's dusty, it's realistic. And just like the originals, we're thrown into a story where we don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, and we have some serious questions. Who is the guy at the beginning who has the map to Luke? He clearly wasn't a Jedi, but he does have some sort of tie-in to the old story because he knows that Leia is a princess. To me, she's royalty. Of course, he dies pretty quickly, so there goes that. During that moment, we're also introduced to Poe Dameron. I'm immediately into his character because he's smart, he's passionate, he's a bit of a smartass, kind of like Han was, just without the kind of seedy element that Han had. But he turns out to be an amazing pilot and a huge asset to the New Resistance. We're introduced to BB-8, the cute, roly droid that's kind of meant to be the R2-D2 of this movie. And I was pretty much sold the second I saw him in the original trailer, and then again when I saw him roll out onto the stage at Star Wars Celebration, and now seeing him on screen, I absolutely love him. But, dumb question, was the concept of a cute robot ever around prior to New Hope? Another question, was I the only one that thought that on the Falcon when Finn gives BB-8 the thumbs up, did BB-8 give him back a middle finger? Or is that just me being cynical? We're introduced to these new stormtroopers who I thought were badass. They weren't complete screw-ups who couldn't shoot a mountain 2 feet in front of them. And what we see is these First Order stormtroopers are brutal. When they're given the order to kill the villagers, with the exception of Finn, we see absolutely no hesitation. And we're introduced to Kylo Ren, and I'm immediately into the way he looks. I like his dark demeanor. I even thought his voice was pretty creepy. And the way he stopped that blaster laser in midair was super dope to me. But while we're talking about him, let's dig a little bit deeper into his character. I actually really like him as a villain, but I see people complaining about certain aspects of him. Mainly about the fact that he's childish and throws temper tantrums. And, well, yeah, that's true. He's being childish because he is a child. He's a child with immense power, maybe even more power than Vader himself, but he's not trained. He's being tempted by the light while being consumed by the dark. Like, how would you act? Was he any more whiny than Anakin was? Or how about how Luke acted? Right. I also hope that we hear more about these Knights of Ren, who I believe that we saw in Rey's vision, because that seemed pretty interesting. Finn, I really liked him as a character. I thought he brought a real element to the story. He's scared, he's relatively unskilled, but he's also brave, and his whole story is that he wants to get away from the First Order because he doesn't like the evil things they're doing. And I do believe this whole change of heart was a bit abrupt, and it wasn't really explained very well, but I assume that we'll get to see and hear more about that in the other films. But, you know, there were also the issues that people were bringing up behind him being a black man in the Star Wars universe, and I'll touch on that very lightly. There were the racists who thought that there shouldn't be a black lead character in Star Wars, and there were the looking for anything to be mad about black folks who thought that there were racist elements to his character, and to both of them, I just say grow the fuck up. Like, to the racists, no real discussion needed, fuck your whole life. To the black folks, y'all the ones who make it harder to prove legitimate issues of racism because you look for any and everything to be pissed off about and you immediately claim racism. And I'm gonna go deeper into this with a later video, but for now, I'll say stop going into everything looking for something to be offended by because guess what? You will always find it. Rey, I loved her character as well, but again, we're immediately stuck with questions. Who is Rey? Who are her parents? What's she been doing? What's her background? I thought she was a great fighter, a self-sufficient survivor, and the fact that we now see that she's a Jedi, even though I expected that from the beginning, was really, really cool. She's had some complaints as well with her role as a woman in this universe, and I'll be addressing that in a later video as well, but again, I say grow the fuck up. She's definitely one of the strongest female leads that we've seen in an action movie in a very long time, one that can actually be taken seriously. I loved how they introduced Finn and Rey. They immediately had a connection that grew throughout the movie, but one that I saw immediately from the start. And you know, the way they ran up on the Millennium Falcon was a bit too coincidental for me. You know, Luke's been gone, they have a droid that's carrying a map to him, and it just so happens that they run into the ship that happens to belong to someone that Luke called a best friend. You know, it's a minor complaint, and like my boy Alex said, we can always fall back on the typical Christian excuse for everything and say, well, the Force caused it to happen. Which is totally fine to me because, you know, the second I saw the Falcon in the air again, it made it all worth it, man. It gave me immediate goosebumps. I love the Chewie we're home scene, again with the goosebumps, just like it did when I first saw it in the first trailer. Man, even though it was a totally different filming of that scene, but it was still awesome. I really like Maz Kanata. You know, I really hope that she's not dead because I'd love to know her story. You know, how did she get Luke's lightsaber? Why does she know so much about the Force? But I could have done without her being CGI. It seemed like that was a bit pointless, and it threw too much back to the prequels, and no one wants that. Speaking of kind of lame CGI, Supreme Leader Snoke. He has to have a great story. He was pretty cool looking, but of course, all we can think of, who is this person, man? What are those battle wounds about? Like, and I've heard theories that he's Darth Plagueis, but who knows? I guess we'll find that out later. And a side note that I just read about recently, I read there's a theory that Plagueis is the one who created Anakin. So maybe we'll hear more about that as well in the next two films. Let's talk about R2-D2, man. There's a lot of confusion with this part, why he was shut down in the first place and why he randomly came on to show the rest of the map. It could be that Luke powered him down originally and allowed him to be turned back on when the rest of the map entered the Rebel base, but that would imply that Luke actually wanted to be found. It could be that Luke powered him down and R2 turned back on because he felt the presence of the Force again in Rey and wanted to bring Luke back. Or R2-D2 knows Rey because he was there when she was snatched from Luke's Jedi class. Or it could be that R2 was just depressed because his master was gone, and regardless of Luke's choice, R2 wanted to bring him back, and he sensed the other piece of the map that BB-8 had. But then again, if that's the case, then why did he turn on earlier? So who knows with this one? Let's talk about the most talked about scene in the whole movie, and that's our beloved scoundrel, the scruffy-looking nerf herder, Han Solo dies in this film. Rest in peace, Han Solo. I believe that Han's death was actually necessary. His death gave Kylo Ren the evil element that he needed in order for us to take him seriously as a villain who is not Darth Vader. It was also the moment that kind of solidifies his allegiance to the dark side of the Force and completes his transformation. So while it was super sad, and I'm not afraid to say that it definitely brought tears to my eyes in the middle of the fucking theater, Han dying needed to happen for the benefit of the story itself, plus for the characters who played out properly. Harrison Ford's in his 70s, man. He can't play Han Solo forever. Plus, he wanted Han to die back in Episode 6, so he finally got his out. But again, rest in peace, Han Solo. I thought the way it ended with Rey finding Luke was amazing. When Luke pulls that hood off and we see his face after 30 years, my stomach knotted up so hard. But am I the only one who found that odd exchange between the two to be a bit dramatic? Like the faces that Rey and Luke were making and the length of that scene was a bit uncomfortable. And whose grave was that Luke was standing in front of? I've seen theories that it's Rey's grave and that Luke thought she had died when Kylo Ren killed off the Jedis that Luke was training. We've also heard that Rey might be Luke's daughter, which that could be true since Luke didn't go through the training that Obi-Wan and Anakin did. He may not be aware of the idea that Jedis are essentially sexless monks. However, I really hope that this is not the case. I don't think that everyone in the Star Wars universe always has to be connected. I'd be more than fine if she just happens to be a girl who's Force sensitive and ends up becoming a very powerful Jedi. So we will see. Overall, I love this movie, of course. Great story, great sets. I think that J.J. Abrams did a great job taking us back to the original universe that we grew up with, from the way the places looked, to the way the characters looked, even down to the subtleties of the lightsaber battle. You know, it not being over the top with people flipping all over the place like they did in the prequels, but more grounded and straightforward like the originals were. I think he did a great job giving us a movie that fits in perfectly with the ones that we love. A movie that is light years better than the prequels altogether. Now, was it too similar to New Hope? That is a completely fair argument, and I did find that the movie played it safe by basically remixing A New Hope with different characters. You know, essentially everything here was a parallel. You had Rey as Luke, you had Finn as Han, Han is now Obi-Wan, and I mean this as in their roles in the story, not literally. You know, even down to the death of Han being a bit too similar to the death of Obi-Wan, down to everyone seeing it, Rey, Finn, and Chewie. You know, even down to Star Killer Base, I don't think that it was necessary. We didn't need a new Death Star. And if we did have one, they could have just left it intact. You know, this was a bit too much of a throwback to the original, with the whole ships flying in and destroying from the inside and barely escaping. However, these are all minor complaints. I was totally fine with it being very similar to the originals because it's the start of a new story, one that we needed to get hooked on very quickly, and it did that job. Was it lazy? Maybe, if you want to be really picky. Personally, I thought they did what worked and worked well. People that are actually vehemently pissed off and complaining about it being too similar, I think those people are the ones that just want to find something to complain about, or there are people whose expectations would have never been properly fulfilled, let alone exceeded. But for me, this totally exceeded my expectations. I'm super happy with the movie, and I'm fucking on the edge of my seat waiting for the next one to come out. So that's it. Let me know what you guys thought of the movie. If you've seen it, throw some comments in the comment section down there. As I said, spoiler away, man. Let's really talk about this shit. What did you think about any of the theories I just threw out? What did you think about the characters in this film? Again, there will be another video getting down into the political elements of this movie, so keep an eye out for that. But until then, thank you for living, thank you for loving, thank you for being you, and I will see you guys next time. Alright? Peace, bitches! And may the Force be with you.